Hello and welcome to Kisma and the Dark Yogi. In this episode, we have a very special guest, Steve Ross, and we are going to talk about letting go. Hello, this is Kisma and welcome to Kisma and the Dark Yogi, brought to you by sourcemovement.com. We're here for people who want to be radically authentic and courageously vulnerable. So whether you're a yoga teacher, entrepreneur, or leader building a tribe, we're here to get your energy and mindset positioned for success. No more stress, no more lack of energy. It's time to lead with your full potential. Our intention is to leave the world a better place than we found it and inspire you to do the same. So hey, if this message in our podcast resonates with you and you've not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to Kisma and the Dark Yogi on iTunes. And while you're at it, give us a rating and let us know what you think. If you have someone in your life that would enjoy this conversation, share it with them. Want more information about the movement? Just go to sourcemovement.com. So let's get started, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Kisma and the Dark Yogi. Well, welcome everyone. This is Kisma from Kisma and the Dark Yogi, and I am over the moon, super excited to have a very, very special guest with us today, Steve Ross. If you are in the yoga world, you must know Steve Ross. And Steve is founder, owner of Maha Yoga in Los Angeles, and he is the author of Happy Yoga, 7 Reasons Why There's Nothing to Worry About. And I have something really special to share about that later. But Steve is also a master. He's well known in the yoga community. He had a great TV show that I also remember tuning into daily on the Oxygen Network called Inhale. And he's often referred to as the yogi for the stars. But what's so fascinating about Steve is he's also spent time, in fact, 4 years as a monk in the Vedic tradition. He has traveled the world, especially India, and studied with some of the greatest masters. And get this, everyone, he's been in recording sessions with bands such as Fleetwood Mac, the Beach Boys, and Men at Work. So, Steve, welcome. And how did you make all this happen? We are so excited to have you, and you are truly a master.
Oh, thank you very much. But actually, I didn't make any of it happen. It just happened, and that's the beauty. There was no me in there. Just kind of. Like everybody, life just unfolds the way it unfolds, and mine just unfolded in a particularly strange way. One foot in the rock and roll world and another foot in the monk world. So It's all very interesting, but
yeah. Was there
it's all good.
It's all good. It's all amazing. Was there a point in your life when you came to that realization of don't make it happen, it's going to unfold, and where you just let it go? Would you remember that time, or was this pretty much how you lived from the time you were a little human?
When you're growing up, and especially in a society like ours where it's very goal oriented and all that, you make effort in certain directions, but then if you pay attention, you notice that sometimes the effort pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and life kind of takes you in a direction that's different than what you had planned on. So, I was a musician, and as you mentioned, I played with all these big bands and toured the world with them and many others. And I was a studio musician, so I used to do a lot of sessions, and then I would go out on these tours and do all that kind of thing, and I thought, well, that would just be it. And then the next thing I know, I met this particular guru in Australia who was on tour, and then I had some big experience with him, and the next thing I know, I'm a monk in India. So, it's nothing was planned. It just kind of unfolded. I guess you could call it your destiny, really.
I love it. Nick and I have... Better. Yeah, for sure. We've been to India quite a few times, but I would say we've probably not stayed more than 2 weeks. Is that right, Nick? Do you think?
3 weeks we did one time.
Yeah. So I would love to hear a bit more about where you were living and how that was. I remember for me just being at the Vedanta Institute about day 4, it's like, what is happening? It's a very intense spiritual environment, and You're like just kind of breathing through and getting through. And here you are, 4 years. I mean, that must have been life-changing for you.
Yeah, totally life-changing. I mean, the interesting thing is, when I first got there, I was coming out of, like I mentioned, a rock and roll background, which is, you do whatever you want, whenever you want. And then I was coming out of that to go into a situation where it's extremely disciplined, where you're getting up at 2:30 in the morning, it's cold, it's dark, you take a bucket, of water for a shower, and then you do 108 sun salutations, and then you meditate 2 hours, and then you do mantras half the day, and then you study scriptures, and then you're more mantras, more meditate, like that every day. There's no off. So it's not like doing a weekend workshop of meditation. You're
right.
fully in it. And so because it's, almost, your level of commitment has to be at a certain degree. And, but, when I experienced what I experienced with that particular guru at that time, it was so overwhelmingly powerful that I thought, this is so much better than anything I've ever experienced in life, and this is all that means anything to me. So I'll do whatever it takes to stay close, and what it takes is to live that lifestyle. So, once you kind of, there were times when you really had to white knuckle it to hang on, because your mind is a little resistant, or a lot resistant. But over time, what happens is the mind starts to get quiet, and your resistance dissipates, and then the body just kind of pushes itself through the schedule, and you're inside free. You're just so that's kind of the situation that unfolded, and that was a blessing, because I realized at that point that your outer circumstances really less responsible for your mental state than I thought, and it turns out that you can be peaceful and happy in any circumstance.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I what's coming to me when you talk about this, Nick and I both have music backgrounds as well. I'm a classical musician. He's a classical and jazz musician, and you have this.
You guys real musicians.
Yeah.
You guys can read. You can read music. You're real musicians. That's good.
Well, I'm always so jealous of you guys that just sit down and play. And I'm the neurotic flutist that has to do her scales every week, which is kind of why I quit when I found your book. But we'll get to that in a second. But the element of external creativity, did you feel that once you were in India and really living and embodying this life, that creativity became internal? Because it seems like two different ends of a spectrum, being, like you said, being able to do whatever you want in the rock and roll world, and then being in the structured, meditating environment, but yet unfolding the true creativity of the spirit.
And true freedom.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting kind of paradox. On the one hand, from my point of view, external freedom is really not possible unless you have internal freedom. I mean, you can kind of go through the motions like the hippie movement, of which I was, in there. But I mean, it's really until the mind is quiet and until you can access really the source of creativity, which is prior and senior to your mind, then it doesn't matter, nothing external will be fulfilling for you. So I kind of, in terms of creativity, there's, I've heard like songwriters, famous songwriters, they say, every day I get up and I sit down at the piano or whatever their particular instrument was, and I practice for 4 hours a day. If something comes, great. If nothing comes, I still do it. And it's really like a meditation. Some days you sit down and meditate and nothing happens, and other days, everything happens. And so, but it's the kind of, it's the commitment to doing it. And when that kind of falls into place and you can get comfortable with the structure of it, then that allows the internal creativity to bubble rather than kind of waiting for it, because, sometimes you could be waiting a long time. So It depends. But I mean, from my personal point of experience, it seemed like the quieter I got, the more creative I felt.
I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, you speak a lot about the internal commitment. That's something that, we really think about and talk about a lot as well. As far as, I think so many times it's like people are trying to get something done. They're trying to accomplish something. They're trying to feel a certain way. And they're it seems like they're so committed to everything external that they think will get them that. But that internal commitment is the piece that is really lacking. Like, is there something that you would say that, like, if there was somebody out there that just, didn't know how to tap into that piece, is there something that you would say to them or any advice for them?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, the main thing is it's almost like the difference between faith and belief. So faith is kind of the understanding that you're supported on a deep level, and you can relax, and then you can kind of move in what direction life takes you. Belief is more like a kind of a superimposition that you use to, as a solution for fear. It's like, I don't know what's happening, and I don't like not knowing, so I'll believe this thing, and that'll make me psychologically secure. But so it's like that. So it's kind of, you get to a place where it's just, it can't be kind of gotten from the outside in. It's the other way around. So, I mean, you can, of course, do tons of yoga, and change your diet and, think positive and do all those things. And all those things are beneficial and should be done as much as you can do. However, that in itself isn't going to produce what you're wanting. What actually produces it is when you let go. It's when you surrender to that which is really prior to that, which is, senior to that. So it's the letting go, it's the surrender to, whatever you want to call it, source, consciousness, God, whatever it is. It's surrendering to that aspect of you that's deeper than your personality. And that means you have to kind of let go of your, ideas of how it should be and just relax into how it is. And that's a big difference.
I love that. That is just giving me goosebumps, and thank you for sharing that. It just has so much meaning coming from you, because I can sense this is, this has been your life's purpose and mission. This is how you live. Something that's coming up, I'd love to ask, because when you talk about your experience in India and this devotion, what was it like when you knew it was time to leave, to come back to the States?
It was interesting. I mean, the guru that I was with said, okay, you should leave now and take what you learned and live it in the world. And so I said, but I don't want to.
You don't want to.
I'm really high and happy here, and I'm content here, and it's beautiful, and I'm loving it, and why would I want to go back into that chaos? Mm-hmm. And, the same source that is here is also there, and it's the only difference is the forms look different, but the reality is, permeates all and everything. And so it doesn't matter where your body is. It only matters where your consciousness is. So I said, okay, I didn't like the idea, but I went for it. And it was interesting. I mean, it was like it's like coming back from anher planet.
It is, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you guys have been to India, so that's like another planet. If you grew up in the Western circumstance, and if you stay there long enough, when you come back here, it's the same kind of feeling. So I mean, here everything is beautiful externally. The roads are well kept, and you can go into a market and buy organic anything and all that kind of stuff. But the inner peace and the love that you see in even beggars in India, you never see here. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, the inside is kind of beautiful there, and the outside is kind of beautiful here. And I think the goal is to kind of combine the two, so you have best of both worlds. So you have the inner peace and love and surrender that they, many of them have, and you also have the beauty and everything else that we
Yeah.
have. So I think you can have both. It's
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. But I mean, so when I came back, I just felt like, okay, it's still me wherever I go.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And when you meditate and your ability to tap into that, which is your essence, which is happiness itself, once that ability is kind of stabilized, then it doesn't really matter where you are. You're alone in the crowd, or it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. And you must have been so beautifully and so well poised to have these conversations with people. It says you're yogi to the stars. I know you've taught many well-known people, and you have a vast amount of students. And having been in the rock and roll world, and then this enlightened place in India, it seems like I imagine that you have a great talent and skill to be able to open up conversations with people and be very compassionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is I just feel like when I wrote that book, I wanted to tackle kind of deep subjects and make them accessible to people that have no, education in that field. Because mostly in the West, we're very naive to that kind of stuff. We don't really know anything. I mean, you open up a yoga magazine, you get some information which may or may not be accurate and everything else. So I just wanted to kind of take the deeper teachings of that kind of stuff and make it, again, accessible. And to do that means you have to kind of translate it into you have to contemporize it into your own culture. So if I only use, yoga words and Sanskrit and everything, I was dreaming in Sanskrit. I learned so much Sanskrit.
Oh my gosh.
and I mean, but to use that on somebody that doesn't have, especially kind of non-yoga people that don't have any background at all in any of that stuff, is really, it produces a kind of distance, which isn't helpful. So I think for me, I like to just make it as ordinary as possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like we've found our yoga godfather.
I know,
I mean,
right?
that's like something that we've been so passionate about, is like the yoga stuff's amazing and the teachings are incredible, but like when you're translating it into everyday language for people and just everyday living for people, it has to be so relatable and just so something that they can just grab onto, so that they can actually use it and start to see some of the shifts and changes that are possible, So I just so appreciate that.
Yeah. Well,
because it's not really cultural, it's really, I mean, it looks like it's, okay, India's got it and we don't. And that's true to a certain extent, but really the essence of all people, it's just, we're all the same. Our enculturation and socialization is totally different, but our essence is the same, and so that can be translated into our own vernacular.
And it's so special when it happens. I wanted to share with our listeners and with you, and we met you at Sedona Yoga Festival last year, and we're going to see you again, and very excited to be sharing some information about that coming up March 10th through 13th. But I was playing flute in the Hong Kong Philharmonic, so I lived overseas for 9 years. I know what it's like to be on a different planet, so to speak, although Hong Kong is way different from India, trust me.
Yeah.
And
I've been to Hong Kong.
Yeah, right. But I started yoga. This friend of mine said, "Hey, come to this yoga studio with me. It's in Long Kwai Fong," and it was this posh yoga studio. And the most yoga I'd ever done was Rodney Yee's tapes, right? And then I would get bored and just turn on reruns of Saturday Night Live. Like I was a runner and a swimmer. I just couldn't get this stuff. So I went to this yoga studio, and there were 5 Indian masters, quote unquote. And all of a sudden I was like, what the heck is going on? It was so physically so hard for me. And especially being in Asia around many women who were so bendy and could do anything, but something really shifted internally. And because I related it to being on stage, I'd been performing for years and years. Nerves wasn't a problem, but I just found this immense focus. I really could drop into state. So I was hooked, and I started just like looking for everything I could find, and I found your book, Happy Yoga. And I have to tell you, I've been through that book, I don't know, 3 times. And it was so, I mean, for anybody that's been to a class or to a retreat or on our podcast, that book is the reason I'm here talking about yoga. And it really inspired me. You know, the classical music world can be awesome. It can also be somewhat negative. You've got a lot of like neurotic musicians competing with each other and a lot of stress. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go back to the States and open up a yoga studio, which I did in Michigan. And you know, now we're back out in California. But I want to thank you for that. And I bet there are so many stories out there of people who read that book and the impact, whether it was in their family life or their relationships or their business, was really strong. So, and if anybody listening has not read it, you got to go out and buy it right now.
You should be my PR person.
Happy to do any sort of whatever you need, because it really was fascinating to me, you know, and it was a language that I understood, and then inspired me to go way deeper. But I would have never, ever gone to India if I hadn't had that doorway open, right? So that's the beauty of having the language where people can, you know, understand it and it's accessible. So thank you for that. The other thing,
pleasure.
you know, so then I started to stalk you a little bit and watch you on Oxygen Network. And my only thing, I'd be like, how is he doing those splits like that? Like, that's the one thing. You'd always have like this awesome music going, and then you just like land in the split or something. I was like, that still really hasn't happened for me, but.
Yeah, I had all my bones removed. And I had the skeleton removed and garden hose put in, so it's much easier now.
It was I was like, wow.
I just was naturally kind of flexible, I think, anyway. I just had one of those bodies. I mean, a lot of what you can and can't do in yoga really don't tell, but it is genetic. And so, you know, because at certain places, bone hits bone, and you can't go farther unless you actually do remove your bone.
Right.
So some people will be able to do certain things and some won't, and I just have one of those kind of mutant bodies that is able to do all kinds of stuff.
But what everyone can do is really begin to tap into that essence like you spoke about, and begin to look at how we're all interconnected. And isn't that really, like when we're talking about the truth of yoga, that's it, right? Coming back to our original state.
Yoga defined by Patanjali, who's considered to be the father of yoga, is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the movement of the mind. So that's the real yoga. The postures are kind of preliminary stuff. I mean, most people are fixated on that because it's something you can see and it's tangible and it's demonstratable and all that. But really, yoga is about stilling the mind, and only when the mind is stilled do you experience your inherent happiness and peace and bliss that is your essence, your true nature. And so that's really what yoga is about, but some people miss that.
Yeah, and what's so interesting, you know, having been in, you know, at least a few of your classes, is that you wouldn't think that popular music, you know, a strong vinyasa, the sweating and all that would set you up in a place to actually have an experience like that. But it actually does that so beautifully, so that by the end of the class, you're really just melting into yourself, and you feel so at home. And I just so appreciated the freedom, the permissiveness, and the ability to just be where you're at, and, you know, put a frickin' smile on and have some fun, you know, moving your body. Yeah. I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I used to teach at a yoga studio that was very serious based, you know. It's just you have to be, alignment was like really incredibly tedious, and everything was very serious, and nobody was having any fun. And I just thought this is the opposite of what yoga is really about, because it's about discovering the joy and happiness that you are. And so you're not going to be serious for 40 years and then suddenly pop into joy. It doesn't work that way. You have to be, you have to be joyful all the way along. So I just thought, this is not my approach. And so I thought, well, I have a music background, so I'll throw in some music and see what that's like. And it actually makes it, for me and for some, it makes it more fun, of course, but also it sneaks up on you. You can, really experience kind of that peace at the end of it that you wouldn't if you were just trying to force yourself into some serious mode.
Yeah, and it's like what you were speaking about earlier, to try and make the yoga practice happen, or to try and force the yoga practice is like trying to make life happen and force life. And
it's like bombing for peace.
Yeah, right. So
yeah, exactly.
So just,
it kind of is, and I mean, a lot of people, it's kind of like that. They're just trying to push life around and and force life to conform with their desires, and it's really, that's the opposite of. I mean, generally yoga is based on, there's a certain amount of control of yourself and your behavior, etc. But there's also that, paradoxically, at the same time, there's that letting go and surrendering to life. And that's where the magic is, because if you don't do that, then opportunities that come your way, you dismiss, and you could miss something really beautiful.
Yes, that's true.
Like I never had any intention to teach yoga, I never had any intention to own a yoga studio. I just was following what seemed to be, the best. I was just following my bliss, as Joseph Campbell said, and it just kind of unfolded in that direction. I mean, it could have easily unfolded in some other direction. But,
yeah. Oh, well, thankfully you
if
did.
I wasn't open.
I love it.
Yeah, but if I wasn't open to it, just like you, I mean, you could still be, in Hong Kong,
right?
Saying, well, yeah, this is great, but I got to do this.
Yeah, and
I
it's
could be still.
Totally, because when we talk a lot about this when in some of our online courses about how children grow up in schools and they're basically told you need to be a certain way, or this is wrong, or you're bad, or you need to fit in a certain way. And that always breaks my heart, because the potentiality, of a human being, as we know, is just beyond what most people realize, really limitless. And if our children had a stronger opportunity to hear that earlier on, I feel that society would be in a different place. So
I agree,
hopefully one day. Hey, I would love to ask, are there any memories of the Fleetwood Mac days or Beach Boy days or being in a studio session that come to mind that you'd love to share?
I mean, there's a lot, because I was with those people for a long time. I mean, one of the highlights, I think, of the Beach Boy thing, I did a lot of sessions with them, and I did some live shows. But I did a live show with them. It was live, free concert in Central Park, and it was an estimated 150,000 people. So you look out, and it's this sea of people. And I remember thinking, if we could just get this group to Ohm for about an hour,
oh man,
we could blow them off from New York.
right.
But so there were a lot of those kind of experiences, and they're all those people. Actually, the Beach Boys, many of whom were meditators. They were, the Maharishi in the old days, and so they were meditators, and but Fleetwood Mac and all those people, they're just really super creative people, and it's just nice to be around that, because that's something that you don't often get the opportunity to kind of really hang out with. And so when you do, it rubs off, and you feel it.
Yeah, it's an awesome frequency to be around. Yeah. And today's in a day in the life of Steve Ross, what does that look like for you?
It's pretty boring, really. I wake up and that's it. No, I wake up and I meditate, and I have some lemon water, and I do a little yoga, and then I go teach some yoga, and then I come back, and then I usually read or meditate some more, play some guitar, or just run air. It's like a normal kind of life, except maybe I add a little more meditation, a little more yoga into it than most people. And I have a tendency these days to be a little more solitary than most. I enjoy my own company, and I just like kind of the unfettered nature of being, alone and just watching the walls breathe.
Which I'm sure you can see that they do. That's awesome. That's awesome. And we are going to see you in March at the Sedona Yoga Festival. We're so excited. For those of you listening, Heather and Mark Titus do an amazing job of putting on a yoga festival that is very unique and special. It's really about, for me, expanding one's consciousness. It's not just about the physical yoga, although there's a lot of fun physical yoga there. Steve, do you know what you're going to be doing this year, or do they just kind of have you show up and do whatever?
I can't remember exactly. I know I'm doing a chant, and I know
Nice.
I'm doing a kirtan, and I know I'm doing my standard ridiculous class, and
which we love. We'll be there.
I'm not sure if I'm doing a yin class or not. I hope I am, because I love doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably doing a combination of those three things.
Okay, that's great. I'm so excited for that. Awesome.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, can't wait for that. Great. Well, I just want to say thank you, really, from just the bottom of my heart. It's so great. I was a little nervous before this interview. Nick was laughing.
It's so weird to see her like a little like starstruck.
I know. I've been on stage with Yo-Yo Ma and Pinchas Zuckerman and like all these nasty conductors, but there's so much about you that has really shaped my life. And so I so appreciate you, and really for taking the time to be here for our listeners and for all that you do.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. Like having these sorts of conversations with people like you is just like my favorite thing in the world. So I just can't tell you how much we appreciate you being on the show and spending some time and sharing some wisdom.
Yes.
Oh, thank you guys. It's so sweet of you. And I can't wait to see you. I'll see you soon. That's soon.
Yes, in March, if not before.
Yeah, much sooner than it seems. Coming up fast.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve Ross. And you have a very awesome rest of your day.
So appreciate it. Namaste.
Thank you. You too. Namaste.
Thank you for joining Kisma in the Dark Yogi. And remember, the Sedona Yoga Festival in 2016 is March 10th through 13th. For your tickets, go to sedonayogafestival.com. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share with someone you love, and we will see you very soon.